Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another kids horror movie review. And this movie goes way back to my childhood. I can remember the day this film came out in 1998, and I got it at Kmart, and I brought it home, and I watched it, and I rewatched it, and rewatched it, and kept watching it for many years growing up. This film was written by Jim Mason and Bob Kirchner, and it was directed by Sean McNamara. And the film in question is Casper Meets Wendy. I have a lot to say about this movie. I have a lot to say. But first and foremost, I've already alluded to this. I remember getting this movie back in 1998. Of course, have a lot of nostalgia with this film. I've seen this movie at least over 50 times in my lifetime, whether I saw it on rewatches on my VHS tape copy I had when I was a kid, whether I've seen it as an adult on this DVD that I picked up a few years ago a few times, or I caught it on reruns on ABC Family, Fox Family, before it was ABC Family even, or I caught it on Fox Kids Network, or I caught it on Disney Channel. I mean, this film is kind of well known. And if you look on the cover of this, you see Hilary Duff. This is actually Hilary Duff's very first movie. And this would air quite often on the Disney Channel back in the early 2000s because Hilary Duff was associated with it and because it was spooky content, so they often played it around Halloween time. So I'm assuming that a lot of people who missed the boat when this film first came out straight to video probably caught it there. So, yeah, I can remember watching this movie a ton growing up. I used to think it was one of my favorite movies. Yes, I'm being dead serious. As a kid, I loved this film to death. As an adult, kind of like my thoughts on Casper, A Spirited Beginning. If you haven't seen my review of that, you go check it out. This does not hold up. This does not hold up whatsoever to my kid brain. And maybe it's because I was a late 90s, early 2000s kid when I first started consuming media and can remember actually cognitively resonating with what was going on in the movies. And I grew up in an era where we were being given movies like Jingle All the Way and Leave It to Beaver and stuff like that. So don't judge me. As a kid, I had no real gauge on actual good quality. So Casper Meets Wendy definitely lives up in the nostalgia bubble, but it starts to burst once you view it as an adult. You know, I'm now 30 years old. Yeah, it's a completely different experience now. But I will say this. Given that this is a Saban Entertainment movie, and if you're not familiar with Saban Entertainment, they're the people responsible for the Power Rangers television show back in the day, and then Disney bought them out, and then they came back to it years later. Saban, during this time period, was making stuff like Power Rangers Turbo, which is one of the worst television series I've ever seen in my life. And this movie is chock full of just that time period of Saban. And then you have Sean McNamara being the director. And if you're not familiar with him, he made stinker kids movies like Three Ninjas, High Noon at Mega Mountain. And it's funny and ironic that I've recently covered a movie called I Downloaded a Ghost, which had the writer of that movie involved. And now you have the director of Casper, A Spirited Beginning, and this being tied to that even. Bizarre, right? But still, you get what I'm saying, right? There's just a lot of stuff whirling around here to make this movie just a crap storm. And trust me, there's a lot to hate about it, but I don't really hate it. So I would actually go out of my way to recommend it to you. If you've heard all the bad things about the Saban, Fox Family, straight-to-video era films that they made for Casper or Addams Family or Richie Rich, all the rumors are basically true, but this one easily is the best one. If you had to watch any of the 4 films out of that lineup, watch this one. So with that out the way, let's get into Casper Meets Wendy. So Casper Meets Wendy is very similar in how it's laid out to Casper, A Spirited Beginning. You start off with the stupid montage of the movie's jingle, and it gets to, you know, that really long credit sequence with the Casey and the Sunshine Band song or whatever is usually playing. And then once it cuts out of there, the movie kind of soft opens, right? And we open up, I think, in Deedstown, which was the town of the previous film, Casper, A Spirited Beginning. And Deedstown supposedly was the first town Casper ended up in after he died, even though it goes against everything we learned in the 1995 film. Yeah, go hear my rant in that movie about that. But anyway, they're at Deedstown supposedly at this baseball game, and they have set up this huge prank of trying to fake an alien invasion and in I guess trying to mock X-Files. And there's X-Files references in the former movie, and I wonder if they carried over to this with certain things that are said, like they're here and stuff like that. And there's like a poltergeist reference as well. But we see Alan Thicke as like a baseball commentator of the game, overlooking this UFO crashing down. It's revealed to be the ghostly trio, and they turn into their ghost forms and unleash this havoc amongst the baseball stands. And we see these goofy hijinks involving the bystanders getting possessed and having stuff, kind of thrown at them at their expense, or, stuff dumped on them as they're running away. And once the people at the baseball game flee, the ghostly trio kind of laugh it off. And Casper butts in and says, hey, why do you got to do this, right? And they're like, you know what? We've been scaring for a while. We need a vacation. So Casper and his uncles decide to go pick a place to go haunt for a little bit, to get out of Deedstown for a little while. And while this is going on, before we catch up what's happening with Casper and his uncles, we get introduced to this young witch named Wendy. And Wendy is played, like I said, by a young Hilary Duff. She wakes up one morning and she knows that the paperboy is coming, and she wants to kind of befriend him. And we get a sense early on that she's trying to make friends outside of the confines of this rickety old house that she lives at with her three aunts that raise her. And her three aunts are played by this trio of lovely women. You have Kathy Moriarty, who actually played the main villain of the first Casper movie in 1995. She is now playing one of Wendy's witch aunts. You have Terry Garr from Young Frankenstein playing another one. And then you have the late Shelley Duvall, who recently passed away, unfortunately. She was in movies like The Shining from Stanley Kubrick. She plays another one of Wendy's witch aunts. And Wendy wants to get the attention of the paperboy and make friends with him, but the aunts catch on that she's trying to make friends with a mortal regular kid and decides to pull a prank on him and scare him away. And Wendy's upset about the situation, is like, why do you got to chase off all my friends? And the aunts are like, because you're a witch, you're in training. We have to train you to be the most powerful witch ever, because you're going to succeed us and you're going to take over the coven and whatnot. And Wendy's like, yeah, but I'm just a kid. I want to experience being a child, right? So you have that typical cliche going on that you might see in stuff like Sabrina the Teenage Witch every once in a while, or something similar with witches. Just pick one, right? But in unrelated events going on, we have this guy called Desmond Spellman, who's played by George Hamilton, who is playing up this character like Vincent Price the entire movie. But Desmond Spellman has a nice, pretty much pimp palace out in an undisclosed location. It's a very modern Art Deco looking home. It's really cool. And he's hanging around, by himself, and he's making use of his magic to make him some, elixirs and whatnot. And he goes to talk to his mirror, just admiring how powerful he is. And the mirror is none other than Pauly Shore, who voiced Snivel from Casper: A Spirited Beginning. Yeah, if you watch this movie, you're going to notice a lot of recasted actors from previous Casper movies in it. Like you have Kathy Moriarty, Pauly Shore. Of course, you're going to have the annual Ben Stein cameo that's in all the live action movies. You're going to notice that. But anyway, Pauly Shore, who plays this mirror, essentially tells Desmond, after he asks who is the most powerful witch or warlock out there, and he says that it's this little witch named Wendy. And he's like, who the heck is that girl? Like, who are you talking about? And he goes on to spiel about how Wendy's this young witch, but she's destined to be the greatest witch of all time. And Desmond essentially is like, not on my watch. She's not going to be any threat to me. I need to take her out. So he goes outside with this magic juice or whatnot, and he summons, using his warlock abilities, like rain clouds to shock the liquid, and it ends up birthing two henchmen, who is played by Richard Mall, who was the principal in Casper: A Spirited Beginning, go figure, and Vincent Schiavelli, who played the homeless person from the movie Ghost back in the day. And they are absolutely funny. They're like these two bumbling wannabe Men in Black figures, and they carry around these Ghostbuster wannabe guns. Like, to essentially hunt down people. And Desmond Spellman essentially sicks them on to Wendy's house because he already knows where they live and all that, because there's a strong use of magic there, and he has this magic GPS he uses. So the henchmen head off there, and of course, they quickly meet up with Wendy and her aunts as they're fighting about what happened with the paperboy. And in trying to get away from them, they manage to distract the henchmen long enough to escape, get on their brooms, and fly away. And as they're flying in the sky, they notice that they're being hunted by Desmond Spellman, and they seem to know who this man is. And they need to hide out for a while and not use magic, because he's going to be able to track them and all the magic they use. So they decide to, they overlook, I guess, this vacation resort of sorts out in the countryside, and they, fall back down to earth, and they land there, and they need to now get rooms. And while this is going on, the henchmen make their way back to Desmond Spellman and say, "Hey, boss, we didn't get him." And Desmond, of course, makes fun of them and kind of punishes them in some ways, but then says, "Okay, we're going to use this GPS, and we're going to wait here patiently. I have it programmed to specifically track Wendy and her aunt's magic, so whenever they use it, we can look to where the radar is pointing at on this map of the world, essentially, and we can go right to the exact spot and get them." So they're basically doing that for majority of the movie from this point, kind of just waiting around for the blip to turn on. So meanwhile, Wendy and her aunts are trying to get a room at this lodge, but they're all booked up because it's a big weekend for the holiday, and there's only one room left. But this woman who got there ahead of them got one of the rooms, and the aunts use some magic to turn her into a goat so they can get the key and head to the room. And as soon as they get in the room, they're like, it doesn't look witchy enough, and they turn it into like pretty much a witch palace. But this immediately almost gives them away to Desmond Spellman and the goons, and then they realize that they've been using too much magic and have to kind of hide it around. But they need to use one more thing of magic to kind of give themselves a new wardrobe and a new look, so they kind of blend in with the rest of the people vacationing there. So they go outside completely in the public and they give themselves new outfits and a montage kind of thing. And yeah, there's some jokes to be had there, I guess, specifically with Terry Garr. But once they get into their outfits, they're ready to kind of take a vacation and enjoy their stay, at least where they're at. And yeah, very quickly, Wendy kind of catches the eye of this boy named Josh, who's played by the same guy who played Justin in Power Rangers Turbo. Yeah, like I said, this is Power Rangers Turbo era Saban stuff. Go figure. And Josh might have a crush on Wendy, and her aunts seem to have a crush on the Cabana Boy by the pool. And one of the aunts has gross, toenails and very smelly feet. One of them has, I guess, a ravishly huge sexual appetite for the Cabana Boy, and one of them is just really into food and wanting to get service. And there's a whole joke montage there about that. And then, of course, Wendy wants to go, get away from that and hang out with Josh. But Josh is playing arcade games with his buddy and is telling her to pretty much get lost. And she's like, well, this guy's a jerk. I have no friends here. I have nothing to do. So she kind of wanders off and goes into this barn area. Well, I haven't touched on Casper in a while, but Casper, he turns out to be at the same vacation lodge with his uncles. And his uncles are pretty much going off on the idea that Casper needs to kind of get more willing to scare people, because they've been in charge to teach Casper how to scare. And if he doesn't get with the program, he might have to get shipped off to Kibosh, essentially. And they don't want to do that because they really do care about him. But at the same time, Casper also feels like he's left out, and his uncles are just polar opposites from him, and he needs to just get away from them because he doesn't agree with their methods. So this prompts him to go over to the barn as well. When Wendy goes inside, Casper's already waiting in there, and they meet for the first time. Wendy is caught off guard because she sees a ghost and kind of knows a little bit of the backstory about ghosts and witches interacting. And this movie, apparently ghosts and witches are mortal enemies, kind of like how the Montagues and the Capulets or whatever or the Capulets from Romeo and Juliet, or the opposing gangs from West Side Story are. They just don't get along. They're mortal enemies, whatnot. So Wendy turns herself into her witch outfit, And Casper sees her and he's like, whoa, 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 I'm friendly. I'm not going to hurt you. I think you're cute. I don't think that you're a menace to me. Why can't we be friends and hang out? And Wendy's like, okay, you got a point. So they go on this whole montage thing where they hang out, and it's very cliche. They're shooting bows and arrows, flying on Wendy's broomstick, doing a bunch of corny stuff. But we get the montage sense that, hey, they've hung out for the day. They're now friends. And Casper and Wendy, after spending the whole day together and getting to know each other, and through some magical antics, it also has put more of a honed-in target for Desmond and the goons, and now they just need to specify where exactly in the specific area on the geographical map they're at. But Wendy and Casper come up with this idea to kind of get back at their aunts and uncles. And there's a dance get-together that following night, or I guess that night in terms of the timeline of the story. And she knows that Josh is going to be there, but she's more interested in having her aunts possibly get to know Casper's uncles, and maybe they can see that ghosts and witches can be friends, and they can hang out. So Casper gets this bright idea to kind of influence his uncles to go to the dance. So he's like, all right, I'll convince my uncles to go to the dance, and all you got to do is bring up the dance to your aunts, and if we get them to go together, I'm sure they're going to hit it off. So Casper does some work on his uncles, tells them, hey, it could be fun to possess people and go have fun, eat some food and whatnot. Fatso, Stinky, and Stretch are all down with it. And then, of course, Wendy's aunts seem to be cool with it because they like to dance and they just want a night out, I guess. So we see a thing where Casper's uncles possess these three guys that kind of look like their body types. And one of them is, I think, Christopher McDonald or Michael McDonald. I forget his name, but he was in Mad TV, and he was also in Halloween Kills. And I really like seeing him in this movie. Always makes me smile. But they, of course, possess these three men. And they go into the dance hall and start wreaking havoc with their personality. You know, Stinky has stinky breath. Fatso likes to eat. And Stretch is just really over the top. And then the aunts walk in. They're immediately smitten with Wendy's aunts. And they start, hanging out with them, having dinner with them, dancing with them. It seems like they're all kind of hitting it off. Stretch likes Kathy Moriarty's character. Stinky likes Shelley Duvall's character, and Fatso likes Terry Garr's character. Well, after a night of whirlwind and just chaos of them dancing, the uncles start to lose control of the people they're possessing, and they go outside, which catches the attention of the aunts, and it's revealed that they were possessing these men, and the men run off, and the aunts immediately put up their red flags. They put back on their witch costumes. They say, get away, ghosts, blah, 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 and they're like, oh, you're witches. And this, of course, upsets Casper and Wendy, who have had their own little dance, and Josh might have overseen this and wants more revenge on Wendy, let's just say, for dancing by herself, and has this idea to kind of mess with her and might affect plot. But once they learn that the setup with the aunts and uncles didn't work, and Wendy's aunts kind of learn of Casper, they want to ban Wendy from hanging out with Casper, and Casper's uncles want to do the same with Casper and ban him from seeing Wendy, which puts a monkey wrench in the situation as once Wendy's banned from hanging out with Casper, this prank thing with Josh happens to the point where he steals her wand. And in messing around with the wand, he accidentally turns himself into a horse or a donkey along with his friend. And because of this wand being used and because of all these magic things being done, there may or may not be Casper's uncles trying to go scare the witches to get back at them for not telling them that they were witches and having them dance with them, kind of thing. The magic finally pinpoints exactly where they're at. So Desmond Spellman and his henchmen find out where they are, and they come after Wendy pretty hard and may or may not take Wendy. And this, of course, upsets the aunts. And then when Casper overhears this, he pretty much decides to go along with this idea to go by himself, go rogue, to go save Wendy. And his aunts are kind of flabbergasted that Casper, who's a ghost, is willing to help out their niece, and realize that ghosts might not be all bad if Casper is as forthright as he is. And this leads to the climax of the story where Desmond Spellman essentially wants to send Wendy to her death down this big hole, like endless black hole of just doom. and wants to send her down there. And there's this whole thing where the aunts kind of watch helplessly as Wendy is almost being sent there. But Casper comes in to save the day and offers enough distraction to kind of distract Desmond Spellman for a little bit. But of course, his uncles come to follow him to see what he's doing, and they realize that Casper's in danger, and what he's done for Wendy is very commendable, and they just want to save him. So they step in and team up with Wendy's aunts to kind of use their brains together and possibly give what Desmond Spellman needs to him and gets what's coming to him. And we see what happens with that. But unfortunately, there was a very close call with Wendy and Casper, and we see what happens with that and maybe if they're okay. And we also get to see what happens with the henchmen. And once we get that resolution, the movie kind of ends off on that generic note that you would expect. Wendy and Casper kind of thank each other for the fun vacation that they've had together, and she thanks Casper for risking himself to possibly, save her life. And they say a fond farewell, and the witches go off on their merry way back to where they live, and then Casper and his uncles go back to where they live. And the movie kind of wraps up in a way that could possibly imply that there could be more interactions with Casper and Wendy down the line. But nonetheless, that's what you're going to expect out of Casper Meets Wendy. So, after that very long plot overview, let's talk about the film, right? For this film, I have way more positives than I do Casper: Spirited Beginning off the bat. One of the things I think this film does way better than Casper: Spirited Beginning is the movie's pace. The runtime of this film is, I think, 94 minutes flat. That's the same exact runtime as Casper: Spirited Beginning. And this film feels far shorter. You could fool me if you played both of these movies side by side. And if I just paid attention to one over the other, I would still think Casper Meets Wendy would end before Casper: Spirited Beginning, because the pacing is so much better. And I don't know if it's because the plot is more entertaining and less boring than Spirited Beginning, and just, less non-creative as Spirited Beginning was. But this movie does have more creative elements and more hijinks, more attempts at humor that land, just going for it in the plot. So, off the bat, this movie just feels like an upgrade. Whether we're talking about, like I said, the pacing, the attempts at humor, the concept being less dull and more creative, a little more goofy, but it has a little more charm going for it. I would say the characters wholesale are likable, or at least more likable. Like the aunts and even the ghostly trio are a bit more likable in this movie, even though they have that forced, West Side Story, Romeo and Juliet feud going on. They still are more likable in the sense that they both exude much love, either for Wendy or for Casper. And what they're doing for them isn't because they aren't interested in being in a family with them, let's just say. It's because they want the best for them, or at least what they think is the best. And they just don't know what the power of friendship can do. And that's a really good theme this movie kind of exudes over its predecessor, is that it actually has a theme and a message to it. And it's about, putting aside differences that you think might separate you from somebody else or something else that supposedly has been programmed in you to make you mortal enemies. You can still have friendships with people despite differences. And that's a good message for the movie, and I really appreciate it about that. I think that Terry Garr, Kathy Moriarty, and Shelley Duvall, while they do feel wasted because they're at points hardly in the movie, I do think that when they are there, they're fun. The ghostly trio is fun as usual. Casper, the voice actor who plays Casper as well, does a really good job for the material they're given. It was still entertaining. It's nowhere near as good as the 1995 film, but I'll take this all day over the previous. Wendy, she's all right. She's not as good as Chris from A Spirited Beginning, if I'm being honest. But, narratively speaking, I think Chris has a way better arc in a story and more emotions with him. Wendy's kind of all over the place, and we'll get into that in the negatives, but Hilary Duff's performance is all right, especially because this is her first movie. She can be ear-grating and cringe-inducing in some of her line delivery, but she's still charming and cute in that kind of innocent kid kind of way. You know what I mean? You can't really hate it. It's very similar to stuff like Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark type acting, but not in the bad way here, because she's trying to play a charming little witch girl and all that. So it is what it is. And as a kid, I really did enjoy her performance a lot because I guess I was tone deaf to, I guess, voice pitch, which I'm more, I guess, acute to hearing nowadays. But nonetheless, she wasn't terrible by any means. Just could have been better in terms of her character and all that. And yeah, one of my last positives is probably my biggest positive to this whole movie is Richard Mall and Vincent Schiavelli as the goons, and George Hamilton playing that Vincent Price type character, Desmond Spellman. The goons are hilarious in this movie, and a lot of their jokes land, and majority of the film's humor that does land is from them too, and I really loved them here. And I have to say this about Desmond Spellman. He is a GOAT tier villain. He's spending the entire movie essentially trying to kill Wendy. That is hardcore, even for a Saban movie, Fox Family villain kind of thing. That was some good stuff. Even though he has some weird moments, and a lot of the film does spin around him hanging out in his house, just waiting around this magical GPS stuff, which is really goofy, but when he does show up in the story, and he does make his presence known to Wendy, man, is he good. He's a scene chewer, and he's fantastic. Fantastic. Especially given the implications of what he's trying to do in the situation. It's pretty good. And that's all I'll say there. Yeah, so I have some really sound positives with this movie, but sadly, they are brought back considerably down by some huge negatives. And I'm talking medium to huge ones here. First and foremost, there are some really cringy moments in this movie, y'all. Whether we're talking about some bad fart humor in the beginning of the movie, which makes me chuckle in that, like, you know, I'm immature kind of way, but it's super bad. And there is some really cringy humor involving, like, the old lady turning into a goat. Like, why is that in the movie? The stinky toenail stuff and the food obsession. And, you know, there's a scene where when Fatso possesses this bigger guy at the dance hall. Like, why? Why? There's some good humor with some of the ghosts. Like, I think Stinky was probably the funniest of the ghosts in this movie, or Stretch even. But good God, most of the stuff dealing with Fatso is just, it's just, like, you can't help but laugh or just stare awkwardly at the screen sometimes with that. But, yeah, there are some pretty poor attempts at humor, even though I did say there was more often hits than misses, unlike something like Casper or Spirit of Beginning. So, not the biggest negative, but it is here. The second thing about this movie is that the movie's atmosphere is a bit of a downgrade to A Spirit of Beginning, if I'm being honest. I think Deedstown as a town felt bigger in scope, unironically, compared to what this movie did. Yeah, you saw Desmond Spellman's house. Yeah, you saw Wendy's house in the beginning of the movie. Yeah, you saw the baseball field at the beginning of the movie. But most of this movie takes place pretty much in these same rooms at this resort, and some outside areas and stuff. But the resort doesn't really mean much to the movie, right? At least in A Spirit of Beginning, Deedstown has this history of the plot, and the Applegate Mansion in that movie is a historical house to the town, and the town has a more integral part of the story. This vacation resort of places means diddly squat to the actual plot. It's just a hideout and an excuse for, I guess, the film company who made Spirit of Beginning and probably made good money off promoting the crap out of it, making merchandise and selling a crap ton of VHSs. They're like, well, we got a little more money to spend. Why don't we go on vacation at the same time while we're making this movie? So they go pick a place out in, I don't know, Idaho, Montana, wherever they filmed this movie, picked a random resort and just made a movie around it. It serves nothing to the actual story other than it just being a hideout for Wendy and Desmond Spellman and the vacation spot for Casper. I would have picked maybe a haunted town around Halloween or something like that instead. But I don't knock this movie because at the same time, going back to positives real quick, this does have that late August through September time of year vibe going for it. So it helps get you in that summerween mood. So it's not all bad here, but could have been better in the location. I'm not a big fan of the location of the film. It's kind of whatever. Not necessarily the biggest negative ever, but it's there. Moving on to characters, like I said earlier, Wendy feels like a downgrade from Chris from A Spirited Beginning. Her character development is very all over the place. The movie starts her off as a kid who doesn't have a normal childhood and just wants to have some shred of normalcy, but then it turns her into kind of wanting to be in this crush man's that's mildly abusive for some reason. And then she becomes the object of affection for Casper and becomes the damsel in distress by the end. I don't really feel like her character really evolved. Like I get that she finally made a friend and, you know, got a shred of normalcy of what a kid does by making a friend, but still, like, I just don't really get why they took some avenues with her character. And to be honest, she has nowhere near the emotional depth as Chris does. So she, in every shred of the sense, feels like a downgrade in terms of like narrative character structure there. But she does have her fun moments, and she is fun as a magic wielding character, and she does have some charm to her. So not the biggest thing ever, like I said, but it's still there. Now we're getting on to the bigger ones. This guy, Josh, who's played by, I think, Blake Foster from Power Rangers Turbo, he's an absolute D-bag, man. I thought Brock was bad. This guy is a straight-up emotional abuser. And, like, I think he's actually implied that he would hit Wendy in the movie, and I'm just like, this is going a little too far. This is going too far for a kid's movie. I have no idea what they were thinking. I don't know if this was in the script for this Josh character. I don't know if he was improvising this. I don't know if Sean McNamara was like, hey, why don't you pretend to be like kind of violent with it? Like this stuff started playing up kind of like a Lifetime movie. And I'm like, where's this stuff coming from? This is a family kids horror movie. Like, why are they having this kid implied to be an abusive boyfriend archetype? Like, what is going on here? He's a terrible character. And what ends up happening with him with a horse, I guess it's supposed to be his comeuppance, but it's cringe. I hate him. He's a terrible character. Add him to the list of terrible Saban characters in these movies. He sucks. He outright sucks. Speaking of sucks, let's talk about the editing. I think the editing in this movie, surprisingly, is worse than Casper: A Spirited Beginning. And whether we're talking about the effects, I do think that they do hold up a bit better and are less laggy than some of the shots we see in A Spirited Beginning's final product here. But good God, man. Stretch is the one that's lagging in this movie as opposed to Stinky in the former one. There's a lot of scenes with him that just look out of line compared to the other ghosts in question. There's some terrible CGI with Desmond Spellman. The pit in the climax of the movie doesn't look that cool. There's fake chairs and furniture CGI that look kind of awful as well. Yeah, the effects are terrible. The soundtrack is kind of mediocre as well as compared to Spirited Beginning. So that's still there too. The plot in this movie is super paper thin, y'all. It's super corny. They all just so happen to be at the same place at the same time. The whole story just happens to have Casper and Wendy just fate encounter and just randomly hang out, randomly come up with this idea that randomly ties to events where Desmond's already hunting them, and then blah, 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 blah. It's just a really ridiculous, far-flung plot. The whole idea and the setup being that Desmond just randomly talks to a mirror one day and wants to come after Wendy for being his competition. And even that, when you look at what happens in the climax, this prophecy of Pauly Shore's mirror character doesn't even matter. It doesn't even make sense. And Pauly Shore's mirror character speaks in rhymes. It's cringe. It's absolute cringe. I'm sorry. While I said this movie is more inventive as a whole compared to Casper: A Spirited Beginning because it's a little more creative, it still kind of falls down these cliches. And the cliches come at the expense of character logic and just really dumb things that the movie tries to introduce, like magical GPS before GPS was really a thing. Like, they had this huge radar map of the Earth that pings anytime magic pops up. Plot convenience in motion. It's lazy. So take that for what you will. There's, of course, the aunts being really just oblivious to what's going on, even though they're aware that Desmond is coming after them and they can track their magic usage. They're still using magic out in the open for everybody to see. Like, come on. How ridiculous can you be about that? It's just ridiculous stuff. And yeah, Not good there. Not good there. So, all in all, Casper meets Wendy. Where it kind of also does a little bit better than A Spirited Beginning is that it's not trying to necessarily be the prequel and the setup to Casper's origin, like Casper: A Spirited Beginning did, that completely made no sense to the 1995 movie. This film almost feels like a standalone. It doesn't even feel like it's directly connected to A Spirited Beginning, and it also doesn't feel like it's directly connected to the 1995 film. So you can honestly treat this as just an Elseworlds type of thing, or just some random movie featuring Casper and his uncles. Right? You don't have to disclose what movie it's actually coming from, right? Which I think does kind of help it on the rewatch. And if I'm being honest, y'all, by every stretch of the word, I could totally understand if most people think this movie is bad. It quite is in a lot of areas. It's just very mediocre, aside from some solid acting performances, a solid message. I do think that the positives inherently would put it pushing that okay to even good territory, but the negatives it has drags it down so low that I was kind of teeter-tottering on a high bad or just a low mediocre. And where I settled with this is on the latter, because compared to A Spirited Beginning, this is a whole step up, maybe even two from that movie. It's more fun, it's less boring, it's more creative, it's got more likable characters. It's just all around. Even the better villain. Desmond Spellman is like a GOAT tier villain. I mean, come on. So yeah, I really enjoyed this movie more in comparison, even though I think A Spirited Beginning did some aspects better. I gave that movie, I think like a 2.5 out of 5 stars, which is a bad movie, because I give a 1-point curve to everything kids horror. For this, I'm willing to give this thing maybe like a 3 out of 5 stars. It's not good, not bad. It's kind of meh. It's mediocre. But it's inoffensive, right? You know, it's kind of pushing that bad territory, but I give it a 3 because I still have some nostalgia with it, and I can't be too mean on it. You know what I mean? And yeah, I've rambled on for close to 40 minutes now, pushing it. And you have to understand, there's some history with this movie for me, and that also does play a factor. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Casper meets Wendy. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this movie before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.